In this video, I'm going to show you 5 different pen shading techniques. Some of them you might be familiar with, others might be new to you. So I have this worksheet or this handout that has the 5 of them shown and also defined. Okay. So for this, you're going to need a piece of sketch paper. And then I found just a lid. This is a lid to like a spice. Or something circular that you can trace. Now you don't want it to be too big. If it's super big, then you're going to spend a long time shading. If it's a little bit small, that actually will work probably better for you. So I'm just going to trace this thing 5 times on here. I think I can squeeze one more on there. It doesn't have to be in a line, but it can be. Alright, so the first one that I'm going to do is hatching. And I'm going to zoom in on the hatching. So here's my example with hatching. So with hatching, all of your lines are going to go in the same direction. And where you want it to be darker, you build up, and then where you want it to be lighter, you have fewer lines. Now I always like to designate where my light source is coming from. So my light source is going to be coming from there. So that means this area right here is going to be my lightest area. It probably isn't going to have any hatching. So whenever I first start doing this, I start by putting just a light layer down where my darker areas are going to be. Now when you're doing this, I would like you to use the ballpoint pen. I provided you with a ballpoint pen. So the awesome thing about ballpoint pens is whenever you press lightly, it's a very light line, but you can also press dark. You can get variations of lines. So that's one benefit of the ballpoint pen. The other benefit is it doesn't smudge or blur or run if it gets wet. And we're going to be eventually using watercolor over our pen, so therefore you don't want anything that's going to bleed. So make sure that whenever you're doing this, it's a ballpoint pen. Alright, so I'm going to continue building up some of my hatches. Again, I'm not changing the direction of my hatches. I'm trying to keep them going in all the same direction. Once I get kind of a nice layer down where I need some shading, then I start to build up where I need darker shading. Alright, so I actually kind of have it starting to build up here, so I'm going to continue on. So now my hatches are a little bit shorter, but they're kind of closer together. So I'm building up those hatches, trying to give the illusion that that area is a little bit darker when compared to the other areas. Hatching is pretty common, but I would say whenever you're shading something like this, where it's round, hatching is difficult. Because you can't curve your lines, it gets a little bit difficult to, like over here I'm struggling a little bit to make it nice and a nice smooth transition. And I think that's just because of the nature of the lines being straight. Alright, so I'm just going to continue building up until I feel like I have smooth transitions going from light to dark. So right now I don't have anything over here, and that actually really kind of bothers me. So I'm going to do very, very short light hatches along that edge. And so I feel like right now it really goes from dark to light very quickly, so I think I want to build up some of my lighter hatches and try to transition that a little bit smoother. So this takes time. If you want to do it well, it's going to take time. It doesn't instantly come. So now I'm just building up some of those darks on that furthest edge away from my lighting. Okay, so that's hatching. Let's see what else we have. The next one on my sheet is cross hatching. So cross hatching is very similar to hatching. It actually starts the same way. However, we can actually go in the opposite direction, building up kind of like perpendicular lines. So this one we might feel that we have a little bit more control with. Let's see how we feel. So I'm going to start just like I did here. My light source is going to be the same direction, so I'm still going to have an arrow over there. Now I'm going to start building up my hatches. And then once I get a nice layer of hatches in, I'm going to go and start cross hatching, adding the perpendicular lines. So there's a layer of hatches. So now I can come in, and I feel like since I can go in an opposite direction, I can actually get closer to the edge, whereas I kind of struggle to do that building those up. So I feel like this one, I'm less restricted. I have a little bit more freedom. Alright, so I kind of have my medium shades down and some light shades, but I really do feel like I need to start building up some of the darkers. If I compare, this definitely is darker than this. So I'm going to go back to the original hatches I was doing and start building up some of those areas. Sometimes whenever you're doing this, it might be beneficial to pick it up and kind of hold it away from you a little bit to see, and then maybe squint your eyes and see how things are like transitioning. Are they going from dark to light smoothly, or is there some choppy areas? Okay, so that is cross hatching. All right, so next on my sheet is contour hatching. So this one might be new to you. Contour hatching. So first we need to really understand what contour means. Contour is something that kind of goes around the edge of something. So if I do contour hatching, that means that my hatches are going to be more in a circular pattern compared to something that has straight hatching or cross hatching. So I'm going to show you my picture here. So notice how all the hatching is kind of curved in that circular pattern because it's going in the contour. So if my object wasn't a circle, it would obviously be a little bit different. So I'm going to start building up some hatches, contour hatches, on the side that's going to be the darkest. I'm not trying to go too dark too quickly though. It's like I like to put some like kind of a medium shade down first, and then I go back and like build up those layers. So for the lighter ones, I really have to be careful of my pressure level. I'm really not pressing. It's almost like I'm barely even touching the paper. Alright, so I have kind of some medium shades, and just like I did with the last two, I need to go back and start building up my layers to get some of those darks. It's important to get those darks. It's important to go back and build up those layers because then we won't, if we don't, we won't have contrast and our drawings are just going to look kind of flat. So it's important to go back and make that extra effort to get some of those dark areas. I feel like that one went a lot faster and I didn't struggle as much as I did, especially with the hatching, trying to get the edges and stuff. So this one actually makes it easier to get that kind of curved edge. All right, again, that was contour hatching. All right, so the next one is scumbling. All right, so here's a picture of scumbling. So with scumbling, it's really kind of like a circular motion that you're doing, trying to build up some marks. And it resembles kind of scribbling, but it's very controlled scribbling. We don't like to refer to what we do as scribbling, but instead it's like a circular and controlled scribbling. Okay, so I'm going to start, okay, again, my light source is the same. And I'm going to start building up some of those scumballs. So I like to go in like really small little circles. So just like I did before, I'm kind of putting down some like medium shades. In my lightest areas, I'm barely even touching the paper. All right, so my highlight's a little bit higher than my arrow. That's okay. All right, so now I can start putting down like a second layer, building up those tiny little controlled scribbles. And as I'm doing this, I'm starting to press a little bit harder on my pen, getting more marks, darker marks. All right, I think I could push it just a little bit more, getting some of my darkest darks out, just to add a little bit of contrast to make it pop a little bit. All right, so that is scumbling. All right, so the last one is something that you're probably familiar with, and it's called stippling. So stippling is tiny little dots. All right, so there's a big advantage to this one and a big disadvantage to this one. Okay, so the advantage is you have a lot of control because you're only making tiny little marks, but it takes a long time. All right, so a lot of people are like, whenever they do this, they're like, oh, I got to be as obnoxious as possible making my dots. And you really don't. Like, I'm making dots here and I'm not making an obnoxious noise. And I'm not abusing my pen. So stippling, again, you feel like you have control because you're only making tiny little marks, but you also feel like you're not making a whole lot of progress very quickly. And so that sometimes is a little bit irritating. I'm just doing some light around the edge just to make it look like an edge and not a line. And that's very quickly going to blend out. And then it's over here that I got to do a lot of the work. So yes, this one's a little bit more time consuming, but if you're one of those people that all the other shading techniques just didn't work for you because you felt like you didn't have control over them, then this one might be for you. Alright, so I don't have my dark darks. I'm not going to do the whole thing, but I'm just going to put, like, maybe do one area building up some of my dark darks. Alright, so something like that is good contrast. Over here, not so much, so I would need to continue on building up my stipples. Alright, so there are the 5 different techniques that you can do with a pen.